So when I first came to Mexico a year ago, I came hauling a 50-pound inflatable mattress. I flew in to a Stanford alumni's house, which I basically had to break into. And I stopped at the first OXXO I saw and bought 3 cheese sandwiches. So I'm not telling you this so you think I'm crazy. I'm telling you this because this is how our adventure began at Bright. Not a perfectly planned adventure, but one that started with a dream and a lot of sloppy and awkward execution. And I'll tell you more about that. I actually didn't know anyone in Mexico when I first wanted to start this company, and that was terrifying. I had looked up in the Stanford alumni database who lived in Mexico City and found this one person, Geoff, who I emailed and convinced to let me stay at his house. Geoff sent me this picture right here, which is where he hid the key in case he wasn't home when I arrived. This is a magnetic key under his garage. And as it turned out, my flight was 3 hours late, and I arrived at midnight when he was already asleep and had to scavenge for this key in the dark. Took me a half hour, and it's a magnetic key, so there's no keyhole. You just swipe it by part of the wall, and the door magically opens. You can imagine going to a new country where you don't know anyone, having to look for a magnetic key to swipe on a wall to open a house you've never been before. This was all terrifying. And then this was, our accommodations. I actually hauled a inflatable mattress because he didn't have enough beds from San Francisco. And this is how Bright began. So I'm telling you this story again because it wasn't all planned. It wasn't awesome. I wasn't the perfect candidate to start this company, but I had a dream, and I wanted to do it. And what Bright does is we provide rooftop solar installations at no upfront cost, and we charge homeowners less for the electricity than they currently pay. In Mexico, because it's so sunny and electricity rates are so high, it's actually oftentimes half as expensive, so 50% the cost for electricity from our installations than buying from CFE. And Mexico is our first market. The reason we think this is important is because we're tackling a big industry with a problem that's growing every single day. So the world grew up on fossil fuels. There were plenty of it, and it was very cheap. The problem is, and this worked for a long time actually, our industries grew on it, economies scaled, and actually the problems didn't actually manifest themselves until recently when we started running out of fossil fuels and electricity started getting more and more expensive. And so we're at a point basically in the evolution of energy where we need a transition because the existing solutions just don't work anymore. And as the world grows, particularly the middle class, they consume more electricity. The first thing the middle class does when they move into the middle class is buy a refrigerator, an air conditioner, a microwave, vacuum cleaner. All of this consumes our fossil fuel energy faster than even before, depleting the resources and actually making energy prices much more expensive. I believe every generation has a revolution. My father graduated in 1950 and worked on the first network computers. And you guys are a very experienced group with what network computers can do. This was before credit cards, before e-commerce, and this was the revolution basically that he grew up in and helped create. And this revolution is still going on. It's largely driven by this graph, Moore's law, which hopefully you all are familiar with. Basically, the transistors per area double every 2 years. And that's why technology has been able to advance so much, and our lives are fundamentally different as a result. I believe the revolution of our generation is the solar revolution. And it's actually governed by a very similar curve. This curve is called Swansons curve. And what governs it is every doubling of installed capacity for solar power, you get 20% cheaper solar panels. And so you can see, or maybe you can't, On the left, solar panels used to cost $10 per watt. Now today, in 2015, they cost 60 cents a watt. So that's a dramatic shift in cost that fundamentally changes how energy dynamics work. This graph shows you a little bit. The green is where solar costs have gone down in the last 6 years. The blue is how the world has scaled up in terms of energy production from solar. We're now at more than 160 gigawatts, which means more than 160 homes across the world are provided, basically just use solar energy. And that's actually, for 7 billion people in the world, that's a small number. So we have a ways to go, but it's a good start. And actually, this opportunity is most prominent in countries like Mexico, where electricity rates are 2 to 3 times as much as those in developed countries. You have much more sun, and you have half the installation cost because of cheaper labor. So maybe everyone understands, but electricity rates are much more expensive here than in a lot of developed countries because a lot of electricity is stolen, and so it's subsidized by those who do pay for electricity. There's an inefficient grid, and you have one government-run monopoly and no competition providing energy. So rates are not driven down like they are in other places, which means this is an ideal place to put solar. And not just Mexico, but the opportunity exists globally in some of the world's largest countries, Brazil, China, and India as well. And as solar costs come down, these countries will tip. So hopefully I've convinced you this is an exciting opportunity. But where does software come into it? Why is this all interesting to you? The only way we can actually enable solar for the world is through software. And let me explain that a little more. What we actually do is put solar on your roof for free, which means we're basically giving you a $20,000 to $30,000 loan, which most people in the world do not have access to today. The reason is most people in the world don't have credit scores. We can't look and see if they paid their bills before and be able to prove that they will pay a $20,000 to $30,000 bill going forward. And so what we need are new ways to access this information and process it. So what we do in Mexico, we use some credit scores, but a lot of what we do is approximate income by looking at the footprint of your house on Google Maps. We look at credit card data where available to see if homeowners have paid their bills and if they haven't. We also look at your utility bill and see if anyone has ever missed a payment or if they're not in their house sometimes, because we can tell based on what CFE tells us. And we have irradiation data, basically how much sun is in any location in Mexico at any time, so we can help predict how much energy a solar installation will produce. And what our software does that we're just starting to develop is take all of this data into account to determine if a homeowner will pay their solar bill if we put $30,000 worth of equipment on their roof. And we want to give solar to everyone. We don't want to reject people. We want to be able to justify putting in installation so they can save money and they can produce clean electricity. And we need folks like you to do that. The reason it's important is we can make a better world for 3 reasons. 1, we finally allow choice in many of these countries. Folks have been handcuffed to their utility, basically paying whatever rates their utility tells them they have to. But with solar, they have another option, a cheaper option, cleaner, with better service. Savings, obviously important, and health. If most of the world runs on solar in the future, we won't have to burn fossil fuels, which means we won't have to pollute the environment, which means we have a healthier world. So we're just building the team right now. We're only 7 people, and we need folks like you to come help us. So if this is interesting, feel free to email me. We're obviously excited about the mission, and hopefully you are as well. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.